You know, there are some stories that stay with you long after you've heard them. Stories that make you think differently about the world, about people, about what it means to be different. This is one of those stories. And I promise you, by the time we reach the end, you'll never look at the word different the same way again. So let me take you to a place called Greendale. Picture it with me. A village nestled between rolling green hills, where crystal clear streams bubble to the land like nature's own music. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where children played freely in the streets, and where secrets, well, secrets were almost impossible to keep. Almost. Our story begins on a night that nobody in Greendale would ever forget. It was a kind of night that makes you want to stay inside, huddled close to the fire. Thunder was shaking the earth so hard that clay pots rattled on their shelves. Lightning split the sky like the heavens themselves were cracking open. Rain poured down in sheets, washing over the village like the world was being cleansed. And in a small hut at the edge of the village, a woman named Ngozi was about to give birth. Now, here's the thing that made everyone talk. Ngozi had been pregnant for 11 months. 11, not the usual 9 months that most women carry their babies, but 11 full months. Can you imagine? The village had been buzzing about it for weeks. What kind of child takes so long to come into the world? They whispered. This baby must be truly special, the elder said, nodding wisely. They had no idea just how right they were. Ngozi's husband paced outside their hut, his footsteps wearing a path in the muddy ground despite the pouring rain. Inside, Adana, the village midwife, a woman who brought hundreds of babies into the world with her gentle, experienced hands, was helping Ngozi through the most important moments of her life. Push, Ngozi, Adana encouraged softly. Your baby is ready to meet the world. And then, with one final push that seemed to take all of Ngozi's strength, the baby arrived. The sound of a newborn's cry filled the hut, cutting through the noise of the storm outside. It was the most beautiful sound Ngozi had ever heard. But as Adana cleaned the baby and wrapped her in soft cloth, her experienced eyes noticed something. Her hands paused for just a moment. Her breath caught. Because this child, this beautiful, perfect child, was different. The baby was intersex, born with both male and female anatomy. It was something Adana had heard about in stories from other midwives, but in all her years, she'd never actually seen herself. Ngozi, exhausted but glowing with the joy of finally holding her child, looked up at Adana's face and saw the concern there. What is it? She asked, her voice trembling. Is my baby okay? Is something wrong? Adana's face was kind but serious as she gently showed Ngozi what she'd discovered. And in that moment, Ngozi's joy mixed with fear. The deep, primal fear that every parent feels when they worry about their child's future. Her husband was called in, and when he understood immediately what this would mean in their village, in their time, in their community where difference was often met with suspicion and fear. They looked at each other, these new parents, and then they looked at Adana with desperate eyes. Please, Ngozi begged, tears streaming down her face mixing with the sweat of labor. Please keep this secret. We'll give you anything, land, money, whatever you need. Just please, don't tell anyone how our daughter was born. Adana looked down at the tiny baby sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms, oblivious to the complicated world she just entered. The midwife's heart was heavy because she understood what they were asking. She understood the weight of the secret this child would have to carry. Your secret is safe with me, Adana promised solemnly, her hand on her heart. I will never speak of this to anyone. And so, as the storm finally began to clear and the first light of dawn broke through the clouds, little Chioma entered the world wrapped not just in cloth, but in a secret that would shape her entire life. The village celebrated her birth with joy. Finally, after 11 months, they exclaimed, she must be blessed by the gods. They brought gifts, food, cloth, beads for the baby's future. They sang songs and danced. Everyone wanted to see the special child who'd taken so long to arrive. And when they looked at baby Chioma, all they saw was a beautiful, perfect little girl. But Ngozi and her husband knew better. Every time they looked at their daughter, They felt the weight of their secret pressing down on them like a physical thing. They loved Chioma with a fierce, protective love, the kind of love that would do anything to keep her safe, even if it meant she'd have to hide who she really was. As Chioma grew from a baby into a toddler, and from a toddler into a young child, that secret became part of her daily life. She didn't fully understand it at first. Children rarely understand the things that make them different. But she knew, in the way children know things without being told, that she had to be careful. By the time Chioma was old enough to play with other children, her behavior had become noticeably different from theirs. While the other village children would run down to the communal stream together, laughing and splashing without a care in the world, Chioma always held back. "Come on, Chioma," the other children would call. "Come swim with us. The water's perfect." But Chioma would shake her head with a gentle smile. "You go ahead. I'll come later." And she would wait until all the other children had finished their bathing and run off to play somewhere else. Wait until the stream was empty and quiet. Only then would she slip down to the water's edge, looking around carefully to make sure she was completely alone, before quickly bathing in solitude. The other children thought she was just extremely shy. "Chioma likes to be by herself," they'd say, shrugging. They didn't know. They couldn't know. And Chioma worked hard to make sure they never would. Her need for privacy extended to everything. When she needed to use the bathroom, she would never go if anyone else was around. She developed elaborate strategies, waiting until everyone was busy elsewhere, finding hidden spots where nobody would see her, timing her needs around the rhythms of village life. It was exhausting, always being on guard, always watching, always hiding. But here's what made Chioma special, and I mean truly special, not just because of how she was born, but because of who she was inside. Despite carrying this heavy secret, despite the loneliness of always keeping herself apart, Chioma had the kindest heart you could imagine. She was like a ray of sunshine in human form. When old Mama Ikeen struggled to carry her heavy basket of yams from the market, who do you think appeared at her side? Chioma, with a gentle smile, taking the basket without being asked and carrying it all the way to Mama Ikeen's hut. When a baby bird fell from its nest and lay helpless on the ground, who carefully picked it up and spent hours making sure it was safe? Chioma, speaking softly to the frightened creature until its mother found it. When the younger children fell and scraped their knees, who was there with comfort and kind words? Chioma, always Chioma. "Look at that girl," the villagers would say, their faces glowing with affection. Such a beautiful soul, such a gentle spirit. And she was beautiful, too, not just in spirit, but in appearance. Chioma had eyes that sparkled like stars reflected in still water. When she smiled, and despite everything, she smiled often, it was like watching the sun break through clouds after a storm. When she walked through the village in her colorful traditional dresses that swayed with her movements, people would literally pause what they were doing just to watch her pass. Beautiful Chioma. They called her our Chioma. Children looked up to her with pure admiration. They wanted to be near her, to hear her kind words, to receive her gentle attention. The adults spoke about her with pride, saying things like, "That girl is going to be someone truly special one day. Mark my words." But what none of them knew, what none of them could see, was a constant struggle happening inside Chioma's heart. She would stand at the edge of the stream, watching the other children play together, hearing their laughter echo across the water, and she would feel this deep, aching loneliness. She wanted so badly to just jump in, to be carefree, to be normal, to not have to worry about anyone discovering her secret. At night, lying on her sleeping mat, she would touch her body and feel the difference there, the thing that made her not quite like the other girls, not quite like anyone else in the village. And she would wonder, why was I born this way? What does it mean? Will I ever be able to just be? Her parents watched her navigate this impossible situation with hearts that broke a little more each day. Ngozi would see Chioma standing alone, that forced smile on her face, and she had to turn away to hide her tears. "Are we doing the right thing?" she'd whisper to her husband at night. "Keeping this secret. Is it protecting her or is it hurting her?" Her husband would hold her close. "What choice do we have?" he'd respond. "You know how people are. You know how they treat things they don't understand. At least this way, she's loved. She's accepted. She's safe." But was she really safe? Or was she just hidden? As Chioma grew older, 12, 13, 14, she became more beautiful, more kind, more beloved by everyone in Greendale. The village elders would watch her walk by and nod approvingly. That one will make a fine wife someday. They'd say, some lucky young man will be blessed to marry her. And that's when Chioma's fear would spike. Because how could she ever marry? How could she ever be intimate with someone without them discovering her secret? How could she build a life with someone while hiding such a fundamental part of who she was? These thoughts haunted her as she approached marriageable age. Every time young men in the village would glance her way with interest, her stomach would twist with anxiety. Every time her parents would hint about her future, about marriage, about children, she'd feel like she was suffocating. But Chioma had learned to hide her feelings as carefully as she hid her body. She'd smile, she'd nod, she'd change the subject, always deflecting, always protecting her secret, always alone even when surrounded by people who loved her. And then one day, everything changed. Alumide, the most sought-after young man in all of Greendale, approached Chioma's father and asked permission to court her. Alumide was everything a parent could hope for. He was strong and hard-working, kind and generous. He had a smile that could light up a room and a reputation for treating everyone with respect. Women throughout the village had hoped to catch his attention, but his eyes had been on Chioma for years. When Chioma's father told her about Alumide's interest, her heart did two things at once. It soared with joy and sank with terror, because she loved Alumide. She'd loved him from afar for so long, admiring his kindness, his gentle strength, the way he treated people. The thought of being his wife made her heart sing. But how could she marry him knowing what she'd have to hide? Knowing that their wedding night would expose everything? Still, when Alumide asked her to marry him, standing before her with hope and love shining in his eyes, Chioma heard herself say yes. Maybe she hoped that love would somehow make it all okay. Maybe she thought she could find a way to tell him. Maybe she just couldn't bear to let go of this one chance at happiness. The village exploded with joy at the news. "Chioma and Alumide," they exclaimed. "A perfect match. A blessed union." The wedding preparations began immediately, and they were magnificent. Every family in Greendale contributed something. Flowers, food, cloth, music. This wasn't just any wedding. This was the wedding of two of their most beloved young people. On the wedding day, Chioma stood in her hut being dressed by the village women. Her wedding gown shimmered like moonlight on water, adorned with beads that caught the light with every movement. The women braided her hair with care, singing traditional songs about love and marriage and the joy of becoming a wife. But as they sang about the wedding night, about becoming one with your husband, about the intimate joy of marriage, Chioma felt ice forming in her stomach. What am I going to do? She thought, her hands trembling as the women placed the final flowers in her hair. What happens tonight when Alumide expects? But she pushed the fear down. She smiled. She let herself be led to the ceremony. She let herself feel, for just a few hours, like a normal bride on her wedding day. The ceremony was beautiful. Drums beat rhythmically as Chioma and Alumide stood before the village elders and made their vows. Alumide looked at her with such pure love, such complete devotion, that Chioma's eyes filled with tears. "I promise to love you," Alumide said, his voice strong and sure. "To care for you, to be yours, always. And I promise." Chioma's voice wavered, but she steadied it. "To love you, to honor you, to be yours." The lie, the omission, felt like ash in her mouth. The celebration that followed was the biggest party Greendale had ever seen. Everyone danced. Everyone sang. Everyone ate until they couldn't eat anymore. Children ran wild with excitement. Old people smiled and remembered their own wedding days. The whole village came together in pure, joyful celebration. And through it all, Chioma smiled and danced and accepted congratulations, while inside her heart was breaking with fear, because night was coming, and with it, the moment of truth she wasn't ready to face. As the sun set and the celebration finally began to wind down, the married women of the village led Chioma to the hut she would now share with Alyamide. They gave her advice, whispered encouragements, and left her there to wait for her new husband. Chioma sat on the edge of the bed, her wedding gown still perfect, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. The door opened. Alyamide entered, smiling, his eyes full of love and anticipation. And Chioma opened her mouth and said the words that would begin the unraveling of everything. "Not yet, my love. Let's wait for the perfect moment." But as the words left her lips, she saw the confusion flicker across Alyamide's face. And she knew that her secret couldn't stay hidden forever. The clock was ticking. The truth was coming. And nothing would ever be the same again. You know what's harder than carrying a secret? Watching that secret slowly destroy the thing you love most. So there's Chioma, married the man of her dreams, living in a beautiful new hut that the village helped them build, surrounded by people who are so happy for them. From the outside, everything looks perfect, like a fairy tale come true. But inside that hut, behind closed doors, there's a different story unfolding. A painful story. A story about fear and love colliding in the worst possible way. Every night it's the same thing. Alyamide would come to bed, his eyes soft with love, reaching for his wife the way husbands do. And every night, Chioma would find a new excuse. "I'm not feeling well tonight, my love. Let's wait just a little longer. I'm so tired from working in the fields today." "Not yet. Please, not yet." She tried to make her voice sound casual, light, like it was no big deal. But inside, her heart was racing. Inside, she was terrified. Because how do you tell your husband, this man who loves you, who chose you, who stood before the entire village and promised to be yours forever, that you're not exactly what he thinks you are? Alyamide, bless his heart, was so patient, at least at first. "It's okay, Chioma," he'd say, pulling back even though she could see the confusion in his eyes. "I'll wait for you. I love you just as you are." But each time he said it, Chioma could hear the unspoken question underneath. Why? Why are you pulling away from me? What's wrong? And it broke her heart because she loved him so much. So much. She wanted to be close to him. She wanted to be a real wife to him. But every time she thought about revealing her secret, about showing him her body, about letting him discover the truth, panic would grip her throat like a hand choking off her air. What if he's disgusted? What if he rejects me? What if he tells everyone? What if he hates me for lying to him? The thoughts would spiral in her mind until she felt like she was drowning. Days turned into weeks. 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks of marriage, and still they hadn't been intimate. And in a village like Greendale, where everyone knows everyone's business, people started to notice. The women would gather at the stream to wash clothes, and the whispers would start. "Have you noticed Chioma and Alyamide?" one would say, scrubbing her cloth against the rocks. "Yes, they don't have that glow that newlyweds usually have." Another would respond, leaning in closer. "Do you think something's wrong? Maybe she doesn't know what to do on the wedding night. Maybe her mother didn't explain. Or maybe," and here the voices would drop even lower, "maybe she doesn't want to be with him." The gossip spread like wildfire through dry grass. Fast, hot, consuming everything in its path. Alyamide started hearing it too. He'd be working in the fields with other men, and they'd make jokes, little comments. Nothing outright mean, but enough to make him feel embarrassed, confused, and increasingly frustrated. "How's married life treating you, Alyamide?" one of the men would ask with a knowing smirk. "It's good," Alyamide would respond, but his voice lacked conviction. Just good? Man, when I first got married, I couldn't keep my hands off my wife. The other men would laugh, and Alyamide would force a smile, but inside, he was dying a little, because he was confused. Genuinely, deeply confused. He loved Chioma. He thought she loved him. So why was she keeping him at arm's length? What was he doing wrong? Was he not attractive to her? Was she afraid of him? Did she regret marrying him? The questions ate at him, day and night. Finally, after a month of this, a whole month of living together, but not really being together, Alyamide couldn't take it anymore. He needed answers. He needed to understand what was happening to his marriage. So one afternoon, he walked to Chioma's parents' home. His feet felt heavy with every step. This wasn't easy for him, going to his in-laws to discuss such private matters. But he was desperate. Ngozi and her husband saw him coming, and their hearts sank. They knew. They knew exactly why he was there. Please, sit down, Alyamide, Ngozi said, her voice gentle but strained. Alyamide sat, his hands clasped together, his head bowed. When he spoke, his voice cracked with emotion. I love your daughter, he began. I love her more than I can put into words. But I don't understand what's happening. Every night, she pushes me away. She won't let me be close to her. She won't. He struggled to find the right words. She won't be my wife in the way that wives and husbands are supposed to be together. Ngozi and her husband exchanged a look heavy with the weight of their secret, with guilt, with fear. Is there something wrong with me? Alyamide continued, and now there were tears in his eyes. Did I do something to offend her? To scare her? Please, tell me what I can do to make this right. I'm lost. I don't know what to do. Chioma's father cleared his throat. Alyamide, you are a good man. A kind man. This has nothing to do with you. If this story has touched something in your heart, don't scroll away. Click that like button, share it with someone who needs hope today, and make sure you subscribe, because more stories like this are coming. Then what is it? Is Chioma sick? Is she afraid? Please, I need to understand. Ngozi wanted so badly to tell him, to explain, to lift this burden. But she and her husband had made a promise all those years ago, a promise to keep their daughter's secret safe. Please, she said softly, reaching out to touch Alyamide's hand. Please be patient with her. Chioma has her reasons. And maybe she'll tell you when she's ready. Just give her time. But Alyamide left their home feeling even more confused than when he arrived. Her reasons? What reasons? What could possibly explain this? His frustration grew. And when frustration grows in a man's heart, sometimes it leads him to make decisions he shouldn't make. Alyamide went to village elders next. Now, in Greendale, the elders were respected men who helped resolve disputes and gave advice. People came to them with their problems. So Alyamide thought, maybe they can help me understand. Maybe they've seen this before. He sat before them in the meeting hut, these old men with weathered faces and wise eyes. Speak, young man, the elders said. What troubles you? And Alyamide poured out his heart. He told them about his marriage, about Chioma's refusal to be intimate, about his confusion and pain. He wasn't trying to gossip. He genuinely wanted help, wanted guidance, wanted to save his marriage. But here's the thing about small villages. Secrets are like water try to be held in cupped hands. No matter how carefully you try to contain them, they always find a way to slip through the cracks. The elders listened seriously. They nodded. They stroked their beards thoughtfully. And they said things like, this is unusual, and we'll consider this matter carefully. But after Alyamide left, they talked among themselves. And then they talked to their wives. And their wives talked to their friends. And those friends talked to their daughters. And before the sun set that day, the entire village was buzzing with the news. Did you hear about Chioma and Alyamide? The marriage hasn't been consummated. Something must be seriously wrong. What kind of wife refuses her husband? The whispers turned into open conversations. The conversations turned into speculation, and the speculation turned cruel. Chioma felt it everywhere she went. The stares, the sudden silences when she walked by, the whispers that weren't quite quiet enough, the looks of pity, of judgment, of curiosity. She started going out less, started staying in her hut more, started feeling like the walls were closing in on her. And Alyamide, he was torn apart. On one hand, he loved his wife. On the other hand, he felt betrayed, confused, and increasingly angry. The pressure from the village, the constant questions, the knowing looks, it was all too much. One evening, after another rejected advance, Alyamide's patience finally snapped. Chioma, his voice was louder than he intended. What is going on? You have to talk to me. I'm your husband. I deserve to know what's happening. Chioma flinched at his tone. She'd never heard him angry before. And in that moment, she realized she couldn't keep doing this. She needed to tell someone. She needed help, but she couldn't tell Alyamide. Not yet. She wasn't strong enough for that. So the next day, Chioma went to see her childhood friend, Amaka. Amaka had always been kind. They'd grown up together, playing in the village square, sharing secrets as little girls do. If anyone would understand, if anyone would help her, it would be Amaka. When Chioma arrived at Amaka's hut, her friend immediately saw the distress on her face. Chioma, what's wrong? Amaka pulled her inside, away from curious eyes. You look like you've been carrying the world on your shoulders. And that's when Chioma broke. All the years of holding it together, all the smiling while dying inside, all the loneliness and fear and exhaustion, it all came pouring out. She cried. She sobbed. Her whole body shook with the release of emotion she'd been holding back for so long. I need to tell you something. Chioma finally managed through her tears. Something I've never told anyone. Something about how I was born. You have to promise. You have to swear that you'll keep the secret. Amaka held her friend's hands, her face serious and concerned. I promise, Chioma. Whatever it is, I'm here for you. Your secret is safe with me. And so, in that small hut, with her voice shaking and tears streaming down her face, Chioma told her deepest secret. She explained that she was born intersex, with both male and female parts. She explained how this made intimacy with Alyamide terrifying. She explained the weight of carrying this secret for her entire life. Amaka listened, her eyes growing wider with each word. When Chioma finished, there was a long moment of silence. Then Amaka pulled Chioma into a tight embrace. Oh, my friend, she whispered. What a burden you've carried all alone. But listen to me. You're still the same wonderful Chioma I've always known. Your heart is still kind. Your spirit is still beautiful. This doesn't change who you are. Chioma clung to her friend, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. Finally, someone knew. Someone understood. She wasn't alone anymore. Thank you, Chioma sobbed. Thank you for not judging me. Thank you for still loving me. Always, Amaka promised. Always. Chioma left Amaka's hut feeling lighter than she had in years. Like maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. Like maybe she could find a way through this. But what Chioma didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that some secrets are too extraordinary for people to keep. Amaka went home that night, her mind reeling from what she'd learned. She tried to keep it to herself. She really did. But during dinner with her family, her mother noticed something was wrong. Amaka, what's troubling you? Her mother asked. Nothing, Mama. I'm fine. But her mother pressed and pressed. And finally, Amaka cracked. You have to promise not to tell anyone. Amaka begged. I promised Chioma I'd keep it secret. Of course, my daughter. What is it? And Amaka told her family. She made them swear to keep it confidential. But her mother told her sister in confidence. And that sister told her daughter, just between us. And that daughter told her best friend, but you can't tell anyone. You see how it works? Like dominoes falling, one after another, faster and faster. Within 3 days, the secret that Chioma had protected her entire life was common knowledge throughout Greendale. Did you hear about Chioma? She's not fully a woman. She has male parts too. That's why she won't sleep with Alyamide. How could she deceive him like that? How could her parents let her marry without telling him? The gossip was vicious. It was everywhere. You couldn't walk 10 steps without hearing Chioma's name. Every conversation seemed to circle back to her. Every gathering of villagers focused on the shocking revelation. And the looks changed completely. Where once people had smiled at Chioma with affection, now they stared with morbid curiosity. Where once they greeted her warmly, now they whispered and turned away. Where once she'd been beloved, now she was a spectacle. Chioma felt it before she even knew the secret was out. She felt in how people suddenly stopped talking when she approached, in how mothers pulled their children away from her, in how the friendly greetings dried up like a river in drought. And then, one morning at the market, she overheard 2 women talking. Can you believe it? Both parts. How is that even possible? Poor Alyamide married to 2. Well, what is she exactly? Chioma's blood ran cold. They knew. Everyone knew. She dropped her basket and ran. Ran through the village, past the staring faces, past the whispers, all the way back to her hut. She slammed the door behind her and collapsed on the floor, her whole body shaking. It's over, she thought. Everything is over. And she was right. Because that evening, Alyamide came home. But he wasn't the gentle, loving Alyamide she'd married. His face was hard. His eyes were cold. And his voice, when he spoke, cut like a knife. Is it true, he asked, what they're saying about you? Is it true? Chioma couldn't speak. She just nodded, tears streaming down her face. Alyamide stood there for a long moment, his jaw clenched, his fists tight at his sides. She could see him struggling with anger, with betrayal, with confusion, with hurt. Why didn't you tell me? His voice broke. I loved you. I don't know what I would have done, but I deserved to know. Before we married, I deserved to know. I was afraid, Chioma whispered. I was so afraid you wouldn't want me, that you'd leave me, So instead you lied? You let me marry you without knowing the truth? Do you have any idea how that makes me feel? How betrayed I feel. The whole village is laughing at me. They're saying I married someone who... He couldn't even finish the sentence. There was a long, painful silence. Then Alyamide said the words that shattered Chioma's heart completely. I think you should stay somewhere else for a while. Until things calm down. I can't. I need time. Alyamide, please. Chioma reached for him, but he stepped back. Just go, Chioma, please. Just go. And so, with tears blurring her vision, Chioma packed a small bag of her belongings. She walked out of the home she'd shared with her husband for barely 2 months. She walked past the villagers who stared and whispered. She walked until she reached the edge of the village, where there was a tiny, forgotten hut surrounded by weeping willow trees and thick bushes. This would be her new home, her prison, her place of exile. That first night alone in that isolated hut, Chioma lay on the hard floor and cried until she had no tears left. She cried for her lost marriage. She cried for the secret that had finally destroyed her life. She cried for the love she'd had and lost. She cried for the girl she used to be, beloved by everyone, and for the woman she'd become, rejected, alone, and broken. The days that followed were the darkest of Chioma's life. She stayed in that little hut, venturing out only when absolutely necessary to find food. The villagers avoided her like she carried a disease. Children who once loved her now hid behind their mother's skirts when they saw her. The women she'd helped carry their loads now turned their backs. Chioma spent her days talking to birds, to trees, to the wind. She found small comforts in nature, in the way sunlight filtered through leaves, in the sound of rain on the roof, in the gentle rustle of grass in the breeze. But at night, alone in the darkness, the loneliness was suffocating. She would lie there thinking, is this my life now? Forever an outcast? Forever alone? Was I wrong to have been born this way? Is this punishment from the gods? And then one morning, Chioma woke to an eerie silence. Something felt different, wrong. She stepped outside her hut and looked up at the sky. Not a single cloud, not a hint of rain. The air was dry, dusty, hot. The drought had begun. And with it, everything was about to change again. You know, sometimes the people we reject become exactly what we need to save us. Remember that, because this final part of Chioma's story will show you just how true that really is. So the drought came to Greendale, and let me tell you, it wasn't just any drought. This was the kind of drought that makes people question everything they believe about the world. The first week, people weren't too worried. It'll rain soon, they said, looking up at the cloudless sky. It always does. But the second week came, and still no rain. The streams that had bubbled happily through the village for generations started to slow. The lush green fields that gave Greendale its name began to turn brown at the edges. By the third week, real fear set in. The crops, the corn, the yams, the vegetables that fed everyone, they started withering in the fields. Farmers would walk to their land with desperation in their eyes, touching the dry, cracked earth and whispering prayers that went unanswered. The river that had always been there, reliable as the sunrise, became a sad trickle of water barely enough to fill a bucket. Women who used to gather at the stream to wash clothes and share stories now had to walk miles to find water. And even then, they had to ration every precious drop. Children cried because they were thirsty. Elderly people grew weaker, without enough water. Animals started dying. The food stores that were supposed to last until the next harvest were getting smaller and smaller. But the drought, as terrible as it was, that wasn't even the worst part. Strange things started happening in Greendale. Things that made people's skin crawl and their hearts race with fear. At night, when darkness fell, the village would fill with sounds that shouldn't exist. Eerie wails that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Whispers in languages nobody recognized. Laughter that was too high-pitched, too cold, too wrong. People started seeing shadows moving on their own, independent of any person or object. Shadows that would slide along walls, that would gather in corners, that would seem to reach out like hands. Doors that were locked tight would swing open in the middle of the night. Items would move from where people left them. Some villagers woke up with scratches on their arms that they swore weren't there when they went to sleep. Nobody could get a good night's rest. Fear spread through Greendale like a sickness, making people jumpy, suspicious, and desperate. The gods are angry, the old women would whisper, clutching their prayer beads. Something has upset the balance of the world. The village elders, those respected old men who were supposed to have answers for everything, they were terrified too. They'd never seen anything like this in all their years. So they did the only thing they could think of. They went to see the oracle. Now, the oracle lived alone in a hut at the very edge of the village, where the forest grew thick and dark. He was an ancient man, nobody even knew how old, with eyes that seemed to see things that normal people couldn't. People were scared of him, but they also respected him because he could communicate with the gods, or so they believed. The elders made the journey to his hut, carrying offerings, cola nuts, palm wine, dried fish. They entered his dark dwelling where incense smoke hung thick in the air, making everything hazy and dreamlike. The oracle sat cross-legged on the floor, his eyes closed, his body completely still. For a long time, he didn't even acknowledge the elders' presence. They waited, their hearts pounding, their foreheads beaded with nervous sweat. Finally, the oracle opened his eyes, and when he spoke, his voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. "The gods are angry," he said, confirming what everyone already feared. "The balance has been disturbed. Chaos has entered this place. Please, wise one," the eldest of the elders begged, Tell us what we must do to restore balance. Tell us how to save our village." The oracle closed his eyes again, and his body began to sway slightly. His lips moved in a silent chant. The elders watched, barely breathing, waiting for the answer that would save them all. When the oracle spoke again, his voice had changed. It was deeper, stranger, like multiple voices speaking at once. Like the gods themselves were speaking through him. "A sacrifice must be made," he intoned. "A pure offering. An untouched woman. A virgin who has never known a man's touch. Only such a one can restore balance and bring the rain." The elders looked at each other with a mixture of hope and dread. A sacrifice. They needed to find a pure, untouched woman. But the oracle wasn't finished. In a voice so quiet the elders had to lean forward to hear, he added something else. Something about danger. Something about the possibility that the chosen one might not survive the ritual. But the elders, desperate, terrified, focused only on saving their village. They made a choice in that moment. A terrible choice. They decided not to share that last part with anyone. They convinced themselves it was for the greater good. When they returned to the village, they called everyone to a meeting around a great bonfire in the center of Greendale. "The oracle has spoken," the elders announced, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "We need a pure, untouched maiden to make a sacrifice to the gods. This will restore balance and bring back the rain." A murmur went through the crowd. A virgin sacrifice. It sounded serious, important, but also achievable. Surely in a village full of young women, they could find one who qualified. They started searching that very night. The elders went from home to home, speaking with families who had unmarried daughters. But something shocking happened. Something nobody expected. Every single young woman they approached, every single one, had to admit she was no longer a virgin. Some had been with their betrothed. Some had experimented with boys from the village. Some had made mistakes they'd kept hidden. The elders were stunned. In their minds, they assumed the village was full of pure young women. But the reality was very different. Days passed. The search continued. The drought got worse. The strange phenomena intensified. People were getting desperate, almost frantic. And then someone, nobody remembers who exactly, someone said the name that changed everything. "What about Chioma?" The crowd fell silent. "Chioma?" Another voice questioned. "The one who, the one who's different?" "Yes, but think about it." The first voice continued. "She was married to Alyamai, but they never, they never consummated the marriage. And before that, she never let anyone close to her. She's technically still untouched." The idea spread to the gathering like wildfire. "It's true. Chioma has never been with a man. She's pure in that sense. Maybe she's exactly what we need. Maybe the gods kept her different for this very purpose." The elders exchanged glances. It was true. Chioma, despite being married, had never been intimate with anyone. She fit the oracle's requirement perfectly. But there was a heavy irony in this moment that wasn't lost on some of the wiser villagers. This was the same Chioma they'd rejected. The same woman they gossiped about cruelly. The same person they'd driven to isolation. And now they needed her. Now they needed her to save them all. That evening, a group of elders made the walk to Chioma's isolated hut. They carried torches that flickered in the growing darkness, casting long, dancing shadows on the path. Chioma saw them coming from her window. Her heart started racing. A group of elders coming to her exile? This couldn't be good. When they knocked on her door, she opened it slowly, her face showing confusion and fear. "Chioma," the elders began, his voice gentler than it had been in weeks. "We need to speak with you. May we come in?" She stepped aside, and they entered her small, sparse living space. There was barely enough room for all of them, but they squeezed in, their faces serious in the torchlight. They told her everything. About the drought, about the oracle's prophecy, about the need for a purer sacrifice, about how she was the only one who qualified. What they didn't tell her was the part about potential danger. They conveniently left that out. "You want me," Chioma said slowly, trying to process what she was hearing, "to make a sacrifice to the gods? To save the village?" "Yes," the elders confirmed. "You're the only one who can do this, Chioma. The only one pure enough." Chioma looked at their faces. These men who represented the community that had cast her out, the village that had whispered about her, judged her, rejected her. And she felt something stirring inside her. Not anger, though she would have been justified in feeling that. Not bitterness, though that would have been understandable too. What she felt was purpose. For the first time since her secret had been revealed, for the first time since she'd been driven from her home, she felt like she mattered, like she had value. Like maybe, just maybe, there was a reason she'd been born the way she was. "Will this save everyone?" she asked quietly. "The children? The elderly? The crops?" "The oracle says it will bring rain and restore balance," the elders confirmed. Chioma was quiet for a long moment. She thought about the village, her village, despite everything. She thought about the children she'd helped when they fell, about the elderly she'd carried loads for, about her parents, even about Alyamide, who'd hurt her but who she still loved. When she spoke, her voice was calm and clear. "I'll do it. For the village. For everyone. I'll go." The elders released breaths they didn't know they'd been holding. Relief washed over their faces. "Thank you, Chioma," they said, and for the first time in weeks, they looked at her with something like respect again. That night, Chioma didn't sleep. She sat by her window, looking up at the starless sky, thinking about her life, about her journey, about how strange it was that she'd gone from beloved to rejected to needed. As dawn broke, painting the dry, cracked earth in soft pink and gold light, Chioma emerged from her hut, wearing a simple white robe the elders had brought her. Her face was serene, peaceful even. She looked like someone who'd made peace with whatever was coming. The entire village had gathered, every single person. They stood in a solemn crowd, watching as Chioma was presented with the sacred offerings she would carry. Fragrant herbs that filled the air with their scent, precious grains from the last of their stores, and a small lamb decorated with flowers and beads. Chioma accepted the bundle with steady hands. "Chioma," the elder spoke, his voice heavy with emotion that surprised even him. "Today you do what none of us could do. You carry our hopes. You carry our future. You go where we cannot go, to the sacred cliff where the earth meets the sky, where mortals can speak to the gods." Chioma looked out at the sea of faces. Some were crying. Some looked guilty. Some looked hopeful. She saw her mother, Ngozi, barely able to stand, supported by her father. She saw Alyamide standing at the back, his face a mask of complicated emotions. "I am ready," Chioma said, her voice carrying clearly across the gathered crowd. "I do this for all of us, for our children, for our future." And then she began to walk. It was a long walk to the sacred cliff, through the dying fields, past the dried-up stream, up the rocky path that led to the highest point in the region. The entire village followed at a respectful distance, a silent procession honoring her courage. With each step, Chioma felt lighter, like she was shedding something. Maybe fear, maybe shame, maybe the weight of that secret she'd carried for so long. By the time she reached the cliff, she felt almost free. The sacred cliff was a dramatic place. It jutted out over the valley below, so high that clouds sometimes drifted past it. This was where, according to legend, the gods could hear mortal voices most clearly. Chioma stood at the edge and carefully arranged the offerings exactly as the elders had instructed. The herbs in the center, the grains in a circle around them, the lamb resting peacefully among the flowers. The villagers watched from a safe distance, their hearts pounding. Chioma raised her arms to the sky and began to chant. Ancient words that had been passed down through generations, words whose meanings were half forgotten, but whose power still resonated. Her voice started soft but grew stronger, rising above the wind that started to pick up. She chanted about balance, about harmony, about the connection between earth and sky, human and divine. As she chanted, something extraordinary began to happen. The sky, which had been clear and merciless for weeks, started to change. Dark clouds began to gather, swirling in from all directions like they were being pulled by invisible hands. They moved fast, faster than natural clouds should move. The wind picked up dramatically, whipping around Chioma, making her white robe flutter wildly. Her voice grew even louder, even more powerful, competing with the roar of the wind. The villagers below watched in awe and growing fear. This was real. The gods were responding. Chioma's chanting reached a crescendo, her arms stretched high, her face turned toward the darkening sky. And then, everything stopped. The wind ceased completely. An unnatural silence fell over the cliff, over the valley, over everything. It was a kind of silence that presses on your ears, that makes your heart pound because it's so complete, so absolute. Then, a beam of pure golden sunlight pierced through the dark clouds, shining directly down on Chioma and her offerings. She was bathed in light, so bright that people had to shield their eyes. And in that moment of impossible light, something struck Chioma. Not a physical thing. Nobody saw what it was, but something powerful, divine, otherworldly. She gasped, her eyes going wide, and then she crumpled to the ground like a puppet whose strings had been cut. The villagers screamed. Some started running toward her, but before they could reach the cliff, rain. A single drop fell on the eldest elder's upturned face. Then another, and another, and then the heavens opened. Rain poured down like the sky was emptying itself, like all the water that should have fallen over the past weeks was coming all at once. It was heavy, drenching, beautiful rain. The villagers erupted in cheers and cries of joy. They danced in the downpour, lifting their faces to the sky, laughing and crying at the same time. Children splashed in the puddles that were already forming. Adults embraced each other. The gods accepted the sacrifice. We're saved. The rain has come. But up on the cliff, Chioma lay motionless. She slowly opened her eyes, feeling the rain washing over her. Every drop felt like a blessing, like a cleansing, like freedom. And then she felt it. Or rather, she felt the absence of it. With trembling hands, Chioma touched her body through the wet fabric of her robe. She felt her stomach, her hips, the place where her secret had been hidden for 23 years. It was gone. The male anatomy that had caused her so much pain, so much fear, so much isolation. It was completely gone. She was whole. She was complete. She was finally, fully, the woman she'd always known herself to be in her heart. Tears streamed down Chioma's face, mixing with the rain. But these weren't tears of sadness. These were tears of overwhelming relief, of liberation, of joy so profound it shook her entire body. "It's gone," she whispered to herself. "Oh, gods, it's gone." She pushed herself to her feet, standing in the pouring rain, and touched her body again just to make sure. It was real. The transformation was real. The elders and villagers reached the cliff, rushing toward her. "Chioma, are you hurt? Are you all right?" But Chioma turned to face them, and the smile on her face was radiant. More radiant than they'd ever seen. It was a smile of someone who'd been carrying an impossible weight and had finally been set free. "I'm more than all right," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "The gods, they accepted the offering, and they gave me a gift. The part of me that caused so much pain, so much fear, it's gone. I'm whole now." For a moment, nobody understood what she meant. Then realization dawned, spreading through the crowd like the sunrise. The gods transformed her. It's a miracle. Chioma has been blessed. The villagers crowded around her, touching her hands, her shoulders, her face, as if to confirm she was real, as if to make sure this miracle had actually happened. The rain continued to fall, soaking everyone, but nobody cared. They were too busy marveling at what had just occurred. The drought had broken. The strange phenomena had stopped the moment the rain began. And Chioma, rejected Chioma, exiled Chioma, different Chioma, had been transformed by divine intervention. Supported by the elders, Chioma walked back down from the cliff. With every step, she felt lighter, freer, more herself than she'd ever been in her entire life. When they reached the village, everyone came out to see her. The people would stay behind, too young or too old to make the journey to the cliff. They saw the change in her immediately. Not a physical change they could see, but something in her spirit, in her bearing, in the way she carried herself. "Look at her," they whispered in awe. "Chioma has been touched by the gods." That evening, as the rain finally slowed to a gentle, nourishing drizzle, Chioma stood in the village center and addressed everyone who had gathered. "The gods accepted our offering," she said, her voice strong and clear. "They've given us rain. They restored balance. But they also gave me something I never thought possible. They freed me from the thing that made me different, that caused me so much pain. I am whole now. I am complete." She paused, looking at all the faces. Faces that loved her, then judged her, then needed her. "But I want you all to know something. Even when I was different, even when I was struggling with my secret, even when you all rejected me, I was still me. My heart was the same. My kindness was the same. My love for this village was the same. Being different didn't make me less human. It didn't make me less worthy of love and acceptance. The shame on people's faces was visible. They looked down, unable to meet her eyes, because they knew she was right. They knew how they'd treated her. They knew what they'd done." Al-Yamid pushed through the crowd, his face wet with rain and tears. "Chioma," his voice broke. "I am so sorry. I should have been patient. I should have trusted you. I should have—" He fell to his knees before her. "Can you ever forgive me?" Chioma looked down at this man she'd loved, who'd hurt her, who'd sent her away, and she felt no anger. Only sadness of the time they'd lost, and hope for what might still be possible. She reached down and took his hands, helping him to his feet. "Al-Yamid," she said gently, "today we've both been transformed. The rain didn't just wash the earth, it washed away the past. We can start again. If you'll have me, if you can accept who I am now, who I've always been in my heart." Al-Yamid pulled her into his arms, holding her like he'd never let go. "I love you," he whispered. "I've always loved you. And I'm so sorry it took almost losing you for me to understand that love means accepting everything, the easy parts and the difficult parts." The village erupted in cheers. People were crying, hugging, celebrating not just the rain, but the healing that was happening right before their eyes. A week later, the village held another ceremony. But this wasn't just any ceremony. It was Chioma and Al-Yamid's second wedding. This time, though, everything was different. This time, Al-Yamid knew the full truth. This time, Chioma stood before him without any secrets, without any fear. This time, their vows meant something deeper. "I promise," Al-Yamid said, his hands holding hers, "to love all of you, to accept all of you, to cherish you not despite your journey, but because of it, because your journey made you the strongest, most courageous person I know. And I promise," Chioma replied, tears of happiness streaming down her face, "to trust you with my whole heart, to be open and honest, to build a life with you based on truth and love." The celebration that followed was even bigger than their first wedding. The whole village participated. But this time it felt different. This time, there was a deeper understanding, a profound respect, a collective acknowledgement of what they'd all learned. As the months passed, Greendale transformed in ways that went beyond the physical. Yes, the crops grew back. Yes, the streams flowed freely again. Yes, life returned to normal. But something had fundamentally changed in the hearts of the villagers. They became kinder to those who were different, more accepting of things they didn't understand, more willing to look past appearances and see the heart of a person. Chioma became a symbol, not just of survival, but the power of sacrifice and the importance of acceptance. parents told their children her story. Elders used her example in their teachings. She became a living reminder that the people we reject might be exactly what we need. And Chioma herself? She finally got to live the life she'd always dreamed of. She and Alyamide built a home full of love and laughter. She walked freely through the village without fear or shame. She bathed at the stream with the other women. She lived openly, honestly, completely herself. One evening, about a year after the drought, Chioma stood at that same cliff where she'd made her sacrifice. But this time, she wasn't alone. Alyamide stood beside her, his arm around her waist, as they watched the sun set over green, thriving valley below. Do you ever think about that day? Alyamide asked softly. About what you sacrificed. Chioma smiled, leaning into his embrace. Every day, she said, but not with sadness, with gratitude. Because that day, I didn't just save the village. I saved myself. I finally became who I was always meant to be. She turned to face him, her eyes reflecting the golden light of the setting sun. Sometimes, she said thoughtfully, the hardest journeys lead us exactly where we need to be. Sometimes being different isn't a curse. It's a gift. We just have to survive long enough to understand why. Alyamide kissed her forehead. And you did more than survive. You showed all of us what true courage looks like. As they walked back to the village hand in hand, children ran up to greet them, villagers waved warmly, and life continued in its beautiful, ordinary way. But Greendale would never forget the lesson they'd learned, the lesson that Chioma's life had taught them. Never reject someone because they're different. Never underestimate someone because you don't understand them. Because the person you push away, the person you judge, the person you exile, they might be exactly what you need to save you. In helping others, we help ourselves. In accepting others, we find acceptance. In loving others despite their differences, we learn what love truly means. And sometimes, just sometimes, the gods work through the most unexpected people to teach us the most important lessons. Chioma had been born different. She carried a secret that isolated her. She'd been rejected by the very people who loved her. But in the end, her difference became her purpose. Her burden became her gift. Her rejection became her redemption. And that, my friends, is the power of acceptance. That is the beauty of sacrifice. That is the miracle of seeing people not for what they appear to be, but for who they truly are in their hearts. Chioma's story reminds us, we're all different in our own ways. We all carry secrets, fears, and burdens. But those differences, those struggles, they don't make us less. They make us exactly who we're meant to be. And when we embrace that truth, when we truly accept it, that's when the real miracle happens. That's when the rain finally comes. May we all learn to see the Chiomas in our lives, the different ones, the struggling ones, the misunderstood ones, and recognize them for what they truly are. Gifts waiting to be opened, heroes waiting to be celebrated, and blessings we almost missed. If the story inspired and encouraged you, please share it, subscribe to this channel so it can reach a wider audience and be inspired as well. Thank you